Okay, you guys know the drill. It is time for my book wrap up of 2024. This morning I finished what I think is going to be my last book of the year, and that was Talking at Night. So I decided I would film my 2024 book wrap up video today. It is the 28th of December, so it's possible I'll read one more, but I'm not really positive. So this year I read 49 books, and majority were thriller slash mysteries, and then I would say romance. There were a few fantasies, non-fictions, and then some like general fiction or contemporary fiction. Rather than going through all 49 books I read, I think I'm just gonna go through my very tops, my kind of high tops, and then the ones that didn't really hit the spot for me. So let's start off strong with The Housemaid. I actually forgot that I read this year. It seems like so long ago, but this was definitely one of my top books, and I think most people have heard of it by now. They're also making a movie that's coming out, I believe, next year. This book really hit the spot for me. I love mysteries and thrillers and any like psychological type thrillers. So basically this book follows Millie, who is our main character, and she has been to prison and she finds a job as a housemaid. And it's for a rich family and a seemingly kind of crazy and annoying boss, and shit just starts to unfold. This one is a very addictive read. It's also a really quick read and perfect for getting out of a slump. In some ways, this book did feel familiar with other like psychological type thrillers that I have read, but nevertheless, I really enjoyed it, and I feel like the twist at the end was good, but not so crazy and outlandish that it didn't make sense with the story. So I gave The Housemaid a 4.5. And I actually ended up buying this copy for my sister, and I gave it to her for her birthday because I loved it so much and I thought I might want to reread it. So now I have an excuse to have a hard copy of it. Keeping with a similar psychological thriller kind of mystery theme, I read Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera, I believe it is. This was the first book that I read by her, and I really enjoyed it. Basically, it follows Lucy, who had a friend named Savvy who was found dead, and Lucy was found just walking aimlessly around town with no recollection of it, with her friend's blood on her. There's not enough evidence to convict her or anything, so she's moved away from her hometown, and we jump from that past to present tense, and she is back in her hometown now, and the story has now been picked up by a true crime podcast named Listen for the Lie. And so the podcaster starts interviewing her and the people around her, and the story kind of just unfolds and we find out what really happened that night. This one kind of actually reminded me of None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, which I really enjoyed, and I think it's because of that podcast aspect, but it gave me that same feeling. This one was also definitely a page turner, and I just wanted to know what happened. I also really liked how realistic Lucy's character was. I feel like she felt like a real person and not just some character in this book. I wouldn't say this is the type of mystery where you're kind of on the edge of your seat trying to piece together the clues and figure out what's happening. It's more you are just reading through the book and seeing it all unravel. And in the end, I think I expected like maybe a little bit of a bigger twist, which maybe let me down a little bit, but all in all, I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend this book. I also am very interested to read whatever she comes out with next, since this was the first book that I read by her. And yeah, again, I gave that a 4.25 stars. The next book I want to talk about is The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson. Every time she puts out a book, I just know it's going to be twisty and interesting, and it's gonna land in the tops for me of the year. So this book did not fall short of that. I think still A Good Girl's Guide to Murder was my favorite. This is probably my second favorite of hers. I did write down that I rated it a 4.25 to 4.5, and I wasn't really sure. If I were to rate it right now, I would say a 4.5 because I do think about it still, and I do remember details from it that I don't remember from other books, so it's definitely stuck with me. So I would say 4.5 out of 5. So we have our main character, Belle. She lives with her father, and she's 18, and her mother disappeared 16 years ago, and she happens to be the only eyewitness of that, but because she was so young, she has no recollection of it. The case basically comes back to life when a team decides they want to film a documentary about it, and you guessed it, Rachel Price suddenly reappears after 16 years of being missing. Similar to that like podcast element, I really like the documentary element in this. I also like how they talked about abandonment and the underlying issue of that. And I think the only issue I had with the book is it kind of wrapped up too perfectly. Things just worked out in the end. But again, it's a book, it's fiction, and I still ate that up. So yeah, next we have Verity by Colleen Hoover. I gave this one a 4.5, and I think this is by far my favorite Colleen Hoover book that I have read. Basically, this book follows a couple people. Verity is an author, but she is unable to write anymore. Verity's husband, Jeremy, hires another author named Lowen to finish the remaining books in Verity's series for her. Lowen moves into the house and has to go through all of Verity's notes and everything. She ends up finding an autobiography that Verity has written, and chaos starts to unfold. She also starts to get feelings for Verity's husband, Jeremy. I feel like this book lacked something in terms of the thriller aspect for me, but because I enjoyed the premise of it, I didn't really care to pick it apart. It is a very quick read. I actually read it on vacation when I went with my boyfriend to Hawaii this year, and he didn't bring a book, so I was like, okay, read this after. And you know what? He is not a reader, and he also ate this up. So I would say if you're in a slump or if you're just starting to read, this is a very good book to start with. Verity got a 4.5. Of course, I also had to include Frida McFadden's new book this year, which is The Boyfriend. I really enjoyed this one as well. So this book has alternating timelines. So it goes back and forth between the past, when we follow a boy named Tom in high school, and the present, where we follow a girl named Sydney and she's trying to find a partner. The story felt very modern because they brought dating apps into it, and there was a twist at the end which I did not see coming, but I did see reviews of people saying that they saw it coming and it wasn't twisty enough. But for me personally, I don't know, I wasn't trying to guess the ending anyways, and I was still shocked. I still loved it. So I give The Boyfriend a 4-star out of 5, and I would definitely recommend it. Now let's talk about what I think is my favorite book of the whole year. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and that is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This is a nonfiction, it's a memoir, and this was just, it was so good. It was emotional, it was funny, it was also very enlightening. Like, I learned a lot from it. It is not a linear memoir, so it jumps from timeline to timeline kind of all over the place, and it basically follows him as he grows up in South Africa during the apartheid. It also really, I guess, honors his mom. It talks a lot about like the strong, beautiful woman she is, how she raised him. I feel like the book just combined all the building blocks of creative nonfiction and just intertwined them so perfectly together, and it just created this beautiful story. So I would 100% recommend this book. If there's one book I would recommend from my whole year, it is this one. So go read it. It is a nonfiction, which I know a lot of people don't enjoy, or sometimes that's like gonna be boring reading about someone's life, but this one was so good. I also saw reviews saying the audiobook is really good because he narrates it. So if you're not into reading, maybe listen to the audiobook. Another book that is very high up there and also just happens to be a nonfiction is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This one was also a 5 out of 5 for me. Basically, this book follows Jeanette as a child becoming an actress and getting into the industry and into Nickelodeon, as well as all the pressure that her mother puts on her and her abusive behaviors. I think one of my favorite parts of the book is my ability to connect with her because she was being so open and honest about everything. She also is a great storyteller and a writer. I would definitely recommend reading this book, but I would just be aware of those trigger warnings if you are sensitive to that. But yeah, it was a great book and she is a great writer, and it was really interesting and also really sad, and it definitely like made me feel something. Okay, next we are transitioning into the romance books, and one of my favorites this year was Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I gave it a 4.75 out of 5. This one was so good in so many different ways. I've never really read a romance like this. Basically, Emma is our main character. She is a traveling nurse and she has a best friend named Maddie. And Emma has this curse that every person she dates then goes on to find their person after dating her. And she ends up meeting a guy online who has the same curse. And so they decide the only way to break the curse for both of them is going to be to date each other. In this book, I really bought the connection between the two characters. Emma's past kind of starts catching up with her and she realizes she needs to deal with that. One thing I will say is it wasn't as like summery vibes as I thought it was going to be. It was more like character and relationship heavy and not as like scenic and environmental, if that makes sense. It was also really cool because I had just read A Part of Your World, which is by Abby Jimenez, and it's technically in the same series, but you don't need to read them in order, or you don't really need to read the other ones at all if you don't want. There are just some characters that overlap between each book, and so you don't need to read them, but it is kind of cool when you do and you make those connections and things start to make sense. And especially between Just for the Summer and A Part of Your World, those ones I think had a very strong connection. So I would suggest maybe reading both. A Part of Your World was great as well, but just for the summer really hit the spot. And then of course I read Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which is also part of the series. This was my favorite of the books in that series. So in this one, Brianna is our main character. She's trying to get a promotion at work. She's also just gone through a divorce. Her brother needs a kidney donor, and then we get this new character named Jacob, and he's a new doctor where she works at the hospital, and they basically start to write to each other and exchange letters. I think everyone who's read this book agrees that Jacob is so wholesome. He is like the most wholesome character I've read about. And I also just have such a soft spot for letters. I love handwritten letters. So this book really resonated with me, and it hit the spot for a little love story. There was a little bit of miscommunication in it, which sometimes annoys me, and I think it annoys some people in terms of like conflict being the miscommunications. Again, Abby Jimenez creates such realistic characters. So this one was a 5 out of 5. Next romance we have is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren, and I give it a 4.5 out of 5. So we have West and we have Anna, and they are married on paper, but they are not in a relationship or together in any sort of way. And one day Wes needs Anna's help, and he needs her to come to his sister's wedding, which just so happens to be on a very nice tropical paradise private island. This was definitely one of the better romances that I read this year, and it gave me like true rom-com vibes. I could totally see it as a movie, and I think that's because of the characters and also just the setting. I would definitely recommend reading this one, especially in the summer. And yeah, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. Of course, also in my top romances, I have Funny Story by Emily Henry. I gave this one a 4.25, and I think this was actually my favorite book that I've read by her. This one is about Miles and Daphne, and they end up finding themselves living together because their exes end up getting together and they're both left without a place to live. So we see them having to share this space, and they also start fake dating. I really like this one. I like just even how they met and the fact that their exes are together now. And also Emily Henry just brings a lot of like insight, and there's a lot of really good points and moments in the book. I'm not going to belabor the point because I think a lot of people have talked about it, but it was also one of my favorite romances from this year by far. Now we need to talk about The Wedding People. This one started off weird for me. Like, I did not think I was gonna like it. I almost stopped reading it, but then I pushed through, and it obviously ended up being one of my top books of the year actually. So I rated it a 4.25 out of 5. I think this is a contemporary fiction, but I'm not positive. Basically, Phoebe is our main character. She goes to a hotel she's always wanted to go to, and she goes there to do one specific thing, and instead of ending up doing that, she ends up meeting the bride of this huge wedding, and all the other people at the hotel are actually wedding guests and in the wedding party, and she is the only person not a part of it. But she ends up becoming friends with the bride and talking to a lot of the wedding people. This one was really intriguing. It basically was about life, about the human experience, about happiness, connection, finding meaning, and going on and being alive essentially. While it touched on very sad topics, it also made me laugh. It was kind of hilarious at points. I would say this one definitely needs a trigger warning, which was not provided at the beginning. But basically, I will say now if you don't want it spoiled, but she goes to the hotel to commit suicide, and that's how the story begins. So if that's triggering, then I would not suggest reading it, but I would suggest maybe giving it a chance if it's not typically a book you think you would like, because that's what I did, and I ended up really enjoying it. Okay guys, the battery on my camera is about to die. I'm gonna do a rapid fire of some of the other books I enjoyed. These ones I'm not gonna go into detail about, but we have How to Walk Away by Catherine Center, The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell, Good Girl, Bad Blood by Holly Jackson, also Finley Donovan by Elle Cosimano, if that's how you pronounce it, Normal People by Sally Rooney, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, Party World by Abby Jimenez, and then also Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, as well as Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now for a couple that kind of didn't hit the mark with me, and I want to say that in no way were these bad books. It's more so I wasn't either in the right mindset, I didn't really connect with the characters, or it just wasn't my type of book, something along those lines. So even though they're in my kind of low end of the list, I know for some people they're in their tops. So starting off with Unfortunately, and I hate to say it, Beach Read by Emily Henry. This book was something I was really looking forward to reading. I'd heard great things, and it's Emily Henry as well. And then when I read it, for some reason, I just did not connect with the characters at all. I think it was kind of a mindset thing as well. Like, I was not like locked into the book, and yeah, for some reason it just didn't hit, and I kind of glazed over it and don't even really remember most of what happened, honestly. So unfortunately, that was in the lower end. I would possibly give it a reread next summer and see if it hits differently for me. But unfortunately for this year, it is in the bottom. Another one that didn't really hit the spot was How to End a Love Story by Kwang Yulin. And I had also heard good things about this, but I think I am a little bit pickier with romances. I did feel like some of it was a little bit unrealistic. I think the main thing that happens, which I don't want to give away, is not something that seemed like she could get over and something I would get over. So for some reason I didn't enjoy it. I also wasn't really, I don't know, really committed to it. It wasn't really a page turner for me. So that one was in my lower end as well. Then there was First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. And I'm gonna be completely honest, I barely remember what this one was about, but at the time I also know I wasn't enjoying it. I almost decided to DNF this one because I was getting a little bit bored, but I ended up pushing through and finishing it. And I think I was like just a bit confused. It also possibly could have been my mindset, but typically I feel like this would be the type of book that I really love. And for some reason, I didn't enjoy it. In the end with this one, I was just underwhelmed, and I don't know if I'm missing something or if I do need to give it a second chance, but unfortunately I didn't really enjoy that one. So I think I'm going to leave it there for today. If you have any book recommendations, I would love to hear them. Or if you have your top books of the year, then you can comment them below as well. I'm actually really interested in knowing. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in 2025, which sounds crazy.